So, when you see the Angels lose, you got to look for the wins. And John and I found a few wins from yesterday's game. Hey, Squid is batting right-handed. Does that make him more valuable, less valuable, as valuable? We'll talk about that. And let's play the game of what if and dream about what this season could have been and maybe be depressed by the end of this episode. You're Locked On with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. If you give us a rate and a review, it helps others to find the podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can like and you can comment and you can subscribe and click the bell to be notified every time a new episode drops.
We appreciate you joining us for this edition of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros, here with you. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
When you're lifelong fans of the team like we are, you got to find the positives in these kinds of situations. And today, I should say yesterday, well, I guess I can say today. Today is a day that we are hanging our heads because the Angels are officially in the books for their 7th straight losing season, Michael. And that is not fun as an Angel fan, but we can find the positives. But that came courtesy of a loss yesterday to the Guardians. It was an early game, got that loss out of the way, and I was just sad the rest of the day. But they lost 5-3 and got swept by Cleveland. That was a tough one, man.
Remember earlier this year when we swept them?
I do.
I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
That was
good
fun.
Days.
The
before times, right?
Yeah, that was before. That was BC. Right? Okay. So in a loss, you got to look for the wins. And John, a couple of wins from yesterday's game was Patrick Sandoval first.
Mm-hmm.
He went 5 1/3, 2 earned runs, no walks, and 3 Ks. It was the second time in his career that he pitched at least 5 innings and didn't walk anybody. And so we talked on yesterday's episode about Jose Suarez and how he's been focused on the mound. And now we can talk about Patrick Sandoval. Here's a guy who has really started to figure some things out, and not walking batters is going to keep the damage to a minimum. Obviously, in a game like this, you want to win. And if the Angels are going to be competitive, they have to win. But it is a win to see Patrick Sandoval pitch so well, go 5 innings, and not struggle on the mound, go after each batter. And even the 3 Ks, John, that's a good indication that he's pitching to contact, even though it's great to strike out everybody. But when Sandoval goes after the strikeout, it seems like he can get really caught up in striking people out instead of getting people out. And so what we saw yesterday is that he was pitching to contact, ground balls, flyouts. And so that's a win, I think, from yesterday's game. Patrick Sandoval going 5 innings and not walking anybody.
He got into some trouble in the second inning. There was a lot of pitches in that inning, and that was sort of when they were making a lot of contact. And the Guardians have made good contact all series. Man, that was they hit for contact, man, and they do not mess around. In fact, they had somebody, I forgot who it was, but they had somebody put down a bunt to get the runner over to second or third, because they were just trying to score runs as one by one, as little as they could. And it was early in the game. It wasn't like it was late in the game. And I think my wife even asked me, like, why is he bunting? It's not that late in the game. I said, because they're smart. They're trying to generate runs. They're trying to get them any way that they can. And that's why they're in the playoffs and we're not.
Speaking of bunting, is it weird that Fletch is not on the IL? Like, I mean, the guy can't even grip the bat, so they're literally playing this like a old National League game. Like, he's the pitcher and he's just bunting runners over. And right now with this offense, you can't do that. And so it just felt like they were kind of giving up that out. And I get it if he can't grip the bat, but why is he even in there or not on the IL so you can bring somebody up? Because he's not going to help your team in the way that you're wanting to have your team be helped. But I guess they've just kind of written the season off. I don't know. But it just seemed kind of odd that they were just having him go up there and bunt every single time. He's 1 for 5, by the way, with his bunting in the last 2 games. But it felt like an easy out. It felt like a wasted out to me.
Yeah, you'd think it would be a little bit more productive, but he just wasn't able to swing that bat, and it's because of that hand contusion he had. He got hit in the hand, and he's not able to grip the bat. But that's what happens. They had Andrew Velasquez go down, and we're going to talk about him a little bit later. But he's out for the rest of the season, a torn meniscus. They gave Michael Stefanik the call. He arrived, but who knows how long he was actually at the game and on the bench. But he was on the bench. Yeah, Mike, I think that there could have been some other options. I think you could have put Duffy at second. You could have put Theis at third. You could have put Ford at first and Rengifo at short and had Stassi catch. But that just didn't seem to be the game plan. And they put David Fletcher in there. So that was a little bit odd. Going back to Patrick Sandoval, I did notice the conversation after he was pulled with Phil Nevin, and he really wanted to stay in. He really wanted to get the last two outs. He had runners on first and third. And because they brought in Herget, they actually ended up pinch hitting for who they had coming up. And they had, he hit into a double play, got out of the inning.
Yeah.
And there was a long camera shot of Nevin and Sandoval having a conversation. And I had to laugh because Nevin's talking to him, very direct. And Sandoval's kind of listening. I mean, he is listening, but he's like kind of looking off into the distance. It reminded me of like a father-son kind of relationship.
Yeah.
And it was good to see because one, you want your starters to stay in the game and you want them to want to stay in the game. And Sandoval's a gamer and a competitor. And I think Phil Nevin, even though he probably is not the answer at manager next season, I think he's done well. I think that these guys have needed a stern manager for the remainder of this season, considering what they're going through. And look, Phil Nevin can't do anything about the hitting. He couldn't do anything about how bad of a slump these guys went into. But I will say, I feel like he's managed the bullpen a lot better, even though Ryan Tepera was the one who gave up the home run to Jose Ramirez. I mean, Jose Ramirez is an all-star, so that's
everybody's giving up a home run to Jose. Yeah.
Yeah. But I have to say, I really have appreciated how Phil Nevin has got these guys through the year. Again, you can't really blame hitting on him unless it's he's the guy putting the guys into the situations, but it was key hitters like Jared Walsh, and Mike Trout got hurt and he was striking out a lot because he was hurt. And so you really can't do much about that. And when there's not enough depth to go around, then you just really don't have any options. But I appreciate what Phil Nevin has brought to this team, and I appreciated seeing him have that conversation with Sandoval. Now get this, top five in the lineup had 9 of the 10 hits. It was Trout, Moniak, Ward, Rengifo. They all had 2 hits. Mickey Moniak hit his 3rd home run with the Halos in 36 at-bats. Yeah. Get this, he had no home runs in 46 at-bats with the Phillies. And so the conversation, I after we had our dialogue yesterday about Mickey Moniak kind of being everything that people have wanted to see out of Jo Adell, I've seen a lot more conversation going on about Moniak and what he's brought to the table so far. And to be honest, I wish Brandon Marsh all the best of luck. We want to see him succeed because he's, he was the heart and soul for the team for a while and really tried his best. I really hope that both of these guys really thrive in their new locations, on their new teams. But Moniak is really showing us something, and it's really taking playing time away from Jo Adell, to be honest.
Yep. And I think it's well-deserved, honestly. I know I'm a Jo Adell fan, but I think it's well-deserved because if Moniak is going to hit the way that he's hitting and he's going to look confident in the outfield, he reminds me a lot of Taylor Ward, John. And Taylor Ward is a constant. He's not incredible. He's a constant. And I wonder for Moniak if he's going to be a guy that can put up 15 to 20 home runs and knock in 60 to 70 RBIs and bat around 280, 260, 280 around there. If this is who he is, then I could see him actually winning a starting job in left field for the Halos next year if we don't go out and get somebody. And at this point, we probably won't get somebody for the outfield. We'll probably get somebody for the infield, maybe shortstop or something like that. But I can see him being somebody that they count on next year because he's one of those late bloomers, and maybe he just needed a brand new area, a brand new organization to bloom in. And perhaps next year it's Moniak, Trout, and Ward in that outfield. And that actually is kind of exciting, I think, because here's a guy who could really become somebody that we could really cheer for. I saw Angels Twitter getting excited about Mickey, and why not be successful in Anaheim and have your first name be Mickey, right?
Mickey, you punched Mickey. What have you done to Mickey? I hurt me. Little Seinfeld for you. Okay, but I understand what you're saying, but the Angels need a clear game plan when it comes to next year. And if they don't go out and get somebody in the offseason, then they need to tell Mickey Moniak, you're the left fielder. Joe Adell, you're the fourth outfielder. Whatever it might be, because the game plan going into this season was, it's going to be Marsh and Adell and Trout, and then suddenly Ward's in there, and rightfully so, Ward was in there.
Right.
But we need to be very clear, especially with the players, what the game plan is next season. We can't give them the runaround.
Agreed.
We can't change the game plan a month into the situation. We just can't do that. We have to let these guys go out there and do their thing and expect to be out there every day. Speaking of which, on Friday, the Angels are taking on the Mariners, who are in the middle of a wild card race, and it's a 4-game set. It's a little bit odd. It wraps around till Monday, Mike. So that's going to be an interesting one. But let's just say that it would be great if Baltimore goes on a tear this weekend and the Angels go on a tear this weekend, and suddenly Baltimore's back in the wild card race. How about that?
We were the team that knocked them out last year, and so perhaps we could just continue to be the devil's advocate as the Halos and knock the Mariners out one more time, Johnny.
One more time. Make it 22 years. Or 21, 22? I don't remember. Who cares?
It doesn't matter. Coming up on Locked On Angels, we're going to play a game called What If, and we're going to dream about what could have been this season. But first, Locked On Angels is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. You can find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. They're the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including the MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So if you haven't yet, we've talked about this in almost every episode. If you haven't yet, you got to head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions, maybe get a little bit of extra cash. They can help you out at BetOnline. And BetOnline is where the game starts.
We want to thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Mike, we had some news after Tuesday night's game when Andrew Velasquez came out. He had injured himself on the play, and that's why we had David Fletcher come in to replace him. And it turns out he's got a torn meniscus.
That's terrible.
That is a shame because he started batting right-handed full time. We all know that he's been a switch hitter, and just recently he started batting exclusively from the right side. And it's unfortunate that his season came to an abrupt end because he was really showing us something as a right-handed hitter. And fortunately, we're at the end of the season. He's going to have time to get surgery and recover and hopefully be somebody who can help us out with his glove and possibly his bat next season. And the way that he'll figure into the lineup, well, we'll see how that shakes out. You and I are of the opinion that he would be a better late innings replacement, somebody off the bench. However, in his time batting right-handed, he's got some pretty good stats.
Yeah, 5 for 15, John, with a home run, 2 RBIs. And there's something about him batting right over left that I actually prefer because we've seen him swing for the fences every single time he's at the plate with runners on as a left-handed batter. But right-handed, he has more of a level swing. He has more of a gap-to-gap swing. Look at me. I sound like a hitting coach. And he just looks really comfortable.
Better than Jeremy Reed.
Well, we need something, right? And so I actually think that it's a good move on his part because he's really valuable on the defensive side. He led the league or is currently leading the league in defensive run saves at short. But Johnny, does this make him, as a right-handed batter and not being a switch hitter anymore, does it make him more valuable, less valuable, as valuable? Go ahead.
If he's not producing from the left side that well, then there's no reason to have him batting from the left side. So to me, this makes him more valuable because if he's hitting more consistently, if he's not swinging and missing and striking out because he's swinging for the fences. We had a caller, I think it was Tracy from Henderson, Nevada, say, I get tired of seeing him screwing himself into the ground because he's swinging so hard like a screwdriver because he's swinging for the fences all the time. I thought that was a great line. And it's true. Every time he's up there, he's swinging hard. He's swinging out of his shoes, and he doesn't need to be doing that. He's not that kind of guy. We've seen him make contact and hit a few home runs, and that's always fun and fine and dandy, but he's not that guy. You're not that guy, bro. You're not that guy. And I say that because he's a defensive guy. And even Andrelton Simmons, who was fantastic at shortstop, one of the best shortstops we've ever had defensively.
Right.
You saw him get better and better and better each season that he was with the Halos. When he came over from the Braves, not that great of a hitter. And to be honest, we didn't get him for his hitting. We got him for his defense. But there was something about him spending time with the Halos that helped him to be a better hitter. And we saw there was times where he was batting cleanup because he was making contact and he was putting the ball in play. And that really needs to be the emphasis for Andrew Velazquez. Put the ball in play. Don't try to swing for the fences. And look, he's got 2 home runs out of it. Or 2 RBIs out of it, I should say, with a home run. And that makes all the difference. And going 5 for 15, that's fantastic. So I think it makes him much more valuable. But what say you?
I think that he is much more valuable, not just because he's batting right-handed, but because he has actually played a full season. And I'm thinking a bigger picture here. I actually think that what we got to see this year is just a glimpse of what he could potentially be. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't go and get somebody. I think we need a shortstop, but I think that what we're going to see is a more mature Andrew Velazquez next season. I think that he's going to be Mr. Squid instead of Squid, because we're going to have to put some respect on his name, and him batting right-handed and making contact is going to be what we need. I think about back in the day when we won the World Series, I think about some of those guys that came off the bench, like Alex Ochoa and Rafael, is it Palmeiro? Not Rafael Palmeiro, but his last name was Palmeiro, I believe. But he was a left-handed hitter that came off the bench as well. And Orlando Palmeiro, that's who it was.
Orlando,
and those two guys, they didn't have incredible careers, but they came in at the right time. I mean, Orlando's had a 300 batting average that year, had no home runs, but had a 300 batting average. And somebody that can come in and make contact and get on base is exactly what you need, because as we mentioned, looking at the game yesterday, the top 5 had 9 of the 10 hits. Now, if those guys at the bottom are getting on base, then we're knocking in some runs. And the OPS, we've talked about this before, the OPS for 1 through 3, 1 through 4 for the Halos was in the high 800s. And then from 5 to 9 was in the low 500s. And so to get somebody, 1, who is going to be a solid backup, but 2, as a solid backup is actually making contact and not striking out, that's going to be huge. And this is why in history, there's a lot of players who just didn't make it because they were striking out. And people are like, well, an out is an out. I actually disagree. I think a contact out is much more valuable than a strikeout, because a contact out has the potential to move a runner over. And Andrew Velazquez, as a right-hander, has shown to make much more contact. So all of that to say, Johnny, I think he's much more valuable to the Halos.
We have enough left-handed hitting in this lineup as well. You've got Ohtani, you've got Jared Walsh, you got Luis Rengifo, who is also a switch hitter. So it's not for a lack of left-handed hitting in this lineup that we need another switch hitter in Andrew Velazquez. I think that we have enough up and down the lineup that's going to get us through any 1 through 9 is going to get us through a game. And so it doesn't matter who they're matching up with. You have enough left-handed bats in the order, I think.
Johnny, Disneyland announced that in Avengers Campus, they're going to create a experience where Thanos is in charge. They're calling him King Thanos.
Okay.
And they're asking the question, what if Thanos won? Meaning that the Avengers never actually got the stones back and never actually took his life and never actually snapped everybody back, right?
Spoilers!
They released it. I didn't release it. They released it. So here's the deal. Since they can play what if, we thought we're going to play what if as well.
Yes, sir.
All right? So
Absolutely.
we're going to ask 3 specific questions and wrestle through the answers. And we would love your answers as well. You can comment below. You can send us a voicemail. You can tweet at us. But Here are the 3 questions we're going to be answering. Johnny, you can start with the first one, but I'm going to read them first. So, what if Taylor Ward doesn't get hurt?
Okay.
What if Anthony Rendon played a full season? And what if Joe Maddon stayed the manager? So why don't you start with the Taylor Ward question? What would happen? What if, John? What if Taylor Ward doesn't get hurt?
I'm going to call you Colin Cowherd after that.
He's a backwards hat kind of guy.
If Taylor Ward hadn't gotten hurt, then I think that he would be easily a 30-plus home run hitter this season, and his average would be sitting somewhere under 300, maybe like 280, 290. And I think that he would have been the one to step up in Mike Trout's place when Mike Trout was struggling and having the back issue. I think Taylor Ward would have been the one to carry the team and help these Halos stay afloat, because remember, the offense went ice cold, and that was the huge problem through the summertime, was the fact that they just were not hitting at all, and Taylor Ward was a huge part of that. But Taylor Ward was a part of the huge success that we had early on in this season, where he was just unstoppable. I don't think he gets taken out of the leadoff spot. I think he stays there. But if he is still carrying the team in my hypothetical what if situation while Trout is out, then I see him moving to 2 and Ohtani batting 3rd behind him instead of, Trout then Ohtani. So yeah, to me, I think Taylor Ward, he's carrying this team through that slump and going to be one of the guys that helps the Halos stay at 500 and not fall as far as they did if he didn't get hurt.
What if Anthony Rendon played a full season? Would this have changed the team? Johnny, I am of the opinion that it would have changed July, because July was terrible. And if Anthony was in the lineup in July, a couple things don't happen. We don't go get Jonathan VR, and Phil Gosselin doesn't play a prominent role on the Halos at third base. We have Anthony Rendon while Mike Trout is out, while he's struggling and hurt, right? We have Anthony Rendon, and we have a lineup where the 1-2-3 and the OPS of the 1-2-3 extends a little bit deeper, maybe to 4, maybe to 5, depending on where Anthony Rendon is. And I think the Rendon that we would have got this year is not the Rendon that he was in 2019, but I think the Rendon that we would have gotten this year would have been somebody who we saw earlier this year against the Nationals with a game-winning hit. Key hits when necessary, even batting left-handed for fun and hitting a home run, right? Like, I think that we would have seen that Anthony Rendon. And I also believe that Rendon would have been very, very influential on the defensive side. I think that we would have seen maybe some plays down the third baseline stopped. I think we would have seen some errors removed. And I think that he would have allowed us to at least not go in such a deep hole in July, because offensively, he's going to help carry this team, and defensively, he's going to help carry this team. So if Anthony Rendon's playing a full season, I think that would have changed the trajectory of this team. And we're not talking about how we've been eliminated from the playoffs today. We're talking about how we're still in the hunt for that third spot, the wild card spot, because Anthony Rendon's been with us all season long.
2 things. Number one, if Rendon is still there, and going back to my Taylor Ward point of him not getting hurt and staying consistent and strong, think about how much more important the emergence of Luis Rengifo would have been. That guy would have gotten hot, and we still would have had the offense around him and the rest of the lineup. Even with Jared Walsh getting hurt and cooling off, you still would have Taylor Ward and Anthony Rendon, and then Luis Rengifo stepping up in a huge way. Honestly, he's a big reason why we aren't worse off this season, because he literally carried our offense for that big part of that slump too. So I thought that was important to point out. Finally, Mike, if Joe Maddon had stayed manager this season, are the Angels a better team with him or without him? Let me give my opinion, and then you can give yours.
Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think that they're any better off record-wise. In fact, I kind of think that Joe Maddon might have made the same mistakes that he was already making in terms of pulling starters very early, putting the wrong guys in the wrong situations, trying to, in his mind, play 4D chess when Joe, we're just playing checkers here, dude. Like, stop taking this guy out and putting this guy in. And, so you know what I mean? Like all this stuff that he was doing in his brain. I say all that, but with the caveat that I think the group would have been a lot more cohesive.
Yeah.
It would have been a lot better in terms of community and culture, and the slump of not hitting very well through all of July might have looked different if they still had their family unit, so to speak. Right. And I think that's what Joe brought to the table. I think Phil Nevin is tough love. I think Joe Maddon is love, I guess.
Okay.
So that's my thought in terms of what would be different if Joe Maddon were still here. I don't think we'd be better off, but I do think it would have been easier mentally on the guys in the locker room, I think, if he was still around. What do you think?
I think that we would be at the 500 mark if Joe Maddon was still around, because I think that Joe had the buy-in from the players. I think that Joe loves this organization. And I think knowing that Joe was talking with Alex Taman and Perry Manassian and was kind of annoyed by that conversation, it seems like Joe was going to be willing to, if he's been around for a while, wants to do well, loves the Angels, was all in. It seems like Joe would have pivoted towards what Perry and what Alex really wanted him to do. And so I think that some of those decisions would have allowed the Angels to be a bit more competitive during the times where they weren't competitive at all, because losing your manager and then bringing in like a Phil Nevin, Phil's getting his feet wet. You're trying to figure out how to manage this game, who goes where. And Phil knows the players and the players know Phil, but there was something about having Joe all off season, having Joe all last season and the season before, Joe being able to know you at spring training. I just think that there's a comfort with Joe being the manager that they had to work through. I think what we're experiencing now with Phil and the conversation he had with Sandy that you brought up, I think that they're starting to get comfortable with him.
Yeah.
I think with Joe, they were comfortable with him. And so the reason why I'd say we'd be about 500 is I think that Joe is crafty enough to where he would listen when he needs to listen. He could pivot where he needs to pivot. And I think that he was able to identify, we saw this with the Cubs, we saw this with the Rays. He was able to identify, I can put these players in these positions and we're going to end up being successful and victorious. I don't know who those players are. I don't know how he would have identified them. I just think that Joe has that gift and that ability. All that to say, I think it was a good move to get rid of him because he was not making great decisions when he was fired. So I do agree with you. Like, his decisions weren't great, but I think there's something in Joe, simply because he loves this team and loves this organization, where he would work really hard to figure it out. And I think his hard work and working with the players would have allowed us to at least float around the 500 mark.
I don't know if I agree with all that. I agree with.
I could tell by your face.
I agree with you in the sense that, yeah, they were familiar and comfortable with Joe, and that's what I'm talking about. Joe loved them, and they loved Joe, and everybody got along. But you can't tell me that since he's left the organization, that Joe has been indignant, and I can't comprehend a world in which he does listen to Taman and Manassian and does pivot. And we also have to remember, he was being grilled by the press. He got mad at Sam Blum, like the most like meek, innocent person, and and then the day before he was fired, you saw Mike Trout and him having a pretty heated conversation in the dugout. They're leaning against the railing, and you see Mike saying, "Come on, Joe." Like you saw that conversation. So I don't know, man. I think that there's a love of the organization on Joe's part, but to me, it just seems like as things got worse, he just dug his heels into the ground even harder. And now here he is having all kinds of interviews, and he's going to write a book and all this stuff. Sure. I just think he's more indignant than he's ever been. And I think that
he's indignant because there's no consequences. He has no consequences for what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
And he's got to sell a book too. So I think that leans in the direction of, when you have no consequences, you have nobody overseeing you. It's easy to go, yeah, I hate those guys. They had all my heart. No, they don't have my heart at all. And I'm writing a book, by the way, and you can buy it on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that his indignation has after being fired is kind of that reaction to being fired. But
I think it got started before he got fired. I think it was already started.
I agree with you. I think he was indignant in some moments, but I think that he was smart enough and he's old enough to recognize,
cared about keeping his job enough to pivot.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest key here is that he's going to, because he wants to be an Angel fan.
Skip. No, I'm just kidding. Come on, Skip.
Tweet at me.
Right.
Well, listen, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast with our buddy Sully. He brings humor, passion, and his unique perspective on every team and shares some of the biggest stories from around the league. And we'll be talking a lot about what happens in the playoffs, so he'll be a great watch for you. You can follow this podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
So what do you guys think? If you feel like these what-if scenarios could have changed the season, we'd love to hear from you. Again, what happens if Taylor Ward doesn't get hurt? Anthony Rendon still on the team, and Joe Maddon is still managing. We want to hear from you, so get in our comments on YouTube or check us out at Locked On Angels on Twitter or at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
Well, we had a great comment earlier this week on YouTube where somebody was like, hey, what happened to all those pitchers that we drafted? 19 of 20 signed in 2021. And so John and I went, what did happen to them? Let's talk about them. So tomorrow we're going to check in on all of those pitchers and see how they're doing, where they're at, and maybe talk potentially when they will arrive on the Halos Major League roster.
Looking forward to that. We hope that you'll join us again. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
My name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
And we'll see you right back here tomorrow for more Locked On Angels.